After the police finally left, we sat awkwardly in the living room, the background noise doing very little to lessen the unbearable silence. Despite the discovery of the thigh, no other body parts were found in the basement freezer, nor the kitchen refrigerator's frozen compartment. My hands felt slightly raw from having repeatedly scrubbing them afterwards. "Should we call your brother?" Lydia asked with uncertainty. "And leave a message on his voicemail that our late grandmother, the same woman that used to knit us sweaters, was really Ed Gein?" "No, I don't see that going over too well." "Well, he's going to need to know sooner or later." "It'll have to be later then. This is just a little too much to process right now." "Jerome, I want you to look at something." "Lydia," I began, but she shushed me and rummaged through her purse. Withdrawing a worn, leather-bound journal, my wife laid it on the coffee table between us. I cautiously picked up the book, a bit wary of what lay inside its pages. "Where'd you find this?" I asked, smelling the faint whiff of Grandma's lilac perfume on its surface. "Which between the freezer when you went to call the police." "Speaking of them, shouldn't this be the sort of thing they'd want to have a look at?" "And they will," she responded, popping one of the peppermint candies my grandmother left out for company into her mouth. "But whatever's in there, no matter how awful, you have a right to know first." My wife understood me well enough to not believe that I'd be okay with delivering the book to the cops without already knowing what was written on every page. The first half of the diary detailed my grandmother's suspicions that my grandfather was cheating on her. It felt like prying, being inside her head like this. June 8th. Silas came home late from his lodge meeting last night. This wouldn't be such a big deal if it weren't for the fact that Vernon Belmont's wife, Wendy, mentioned at the market today that the meeting had been called off 2 days ago. We stood there in the produce section and chatted about the unsightly prices of cherries, while inside I tried not to picture my husband's naked ass gyrating atop some girl young enough to be our daughter. Of course, he very well could have lied to go to the bar with his friends. Men often lie, sometimes for the most ridiculous reasons that wouldn't even upset their wives if they simply told us. Grandma further detailed her anxiety regarding Grandpa, who began showing up late for dinner and berating her for it not being hot. My grandfather had always been a distant figure during the years I knew him. The most attention he displayed toward me and my brother would be to ruffle our hair. But this man that my grandmother described was a bastard that I grew to hate with every entry. He'd carried on a number of affairs, including one with a woman named Gail Connor, who delivered their mail. When she confronted him with it, he'd left an especially nasty bruise on Grandma's left wrist. If he were still alive out there somewhere, I hoped his balls were being removed from the late stages of testicular cancer. Things took an interesting turn when Lydia and me got halfway through the journal. My grandmother talking about her very first trip to the Parkville butcher shop. August 12th. I got home from the butcher shop to discover that Manfred had given me 10 pork chops instead of the 6 I'd asked for. This is the second time he's given me something extra with my order, the first being a somewhat larger amount of chicken wings than I recalled selecting from the display. We'd gotten so deep into a talk about stews that I hadn't even noticed the brown paper bag he'd handed me was weightier than it should have been. "If you cook as good as you talk stewing, then that's a meal you owe me." Manfred laughed, his eyes never leaving mine. Was he flirting with me? "Looks like Manfred had a crush on her a little bit," Lydia commented. "I think she liked him a little bit back," I said, skimming through the next several pages. "What's next?" "More of Grandpa swinging his dick around the neighborhood." Grandma wrote that she followed him to a cheap motel and saw he and a lady from their church get a room together. Jesus, my wife frowned. Was he working his way through the entire neighborhood? I'm just amazed that he had that much energy. He couldn't even mow the lawn without having to stop to use his inhaler. Does she mention the butcher shop again? Maybe that'll lead us a little close to what we found. I mean, the whole elderly sex thing is sort of intriguing and all, but it's not really the reason we're reading this thing. I finally located an entry closer to what we were mining for. August 22nd. A week after I had lunch with Manfred and told him way more than I should have, I received the first package. I answered the door to find Vince, a nice young man that helped around the shop, with a neatly wrapped parcel and a sealed envelope. After tipping him, I undid it in the kitchen to find a pound of glorious-looking stew meat. Its brilliant pink texture unlike any pork I'd ever laid eyes on. Manfred's note in the attached envelope was brief. Try it with rosemary. I dropped a cube steak on the linoleum floor and then fried it for Silas's dinner. Manfred's gift was combined with fresh rosemary and root vegetables I'd plucked from my garden, simmering into a stew so delicious I wept.